Appreciate it. Hello, everyone. What an emotional morning already, yeah? Okay, Christmas time is here. Happiness and cheer. Fun for all that children call their favorite time of year, right? But you guys, Charlie Brown definitely fooled me because it doesn't seem like his favorite time of year. He likes some parts of Christmas, but for the life of him, he just can't figure it out. He's asking the right questions and he's doing the right things, and yet what Christmas is all about, the one with beauty everywhere and joyful memories there, and the one with happiness and cheer that's fun for all, that Christmas somehow just keeps eluding him. Maybe you can relate? Will Christmas time come and go again, leaving Charlie or us with the disappointment that it should have been more? Is it somehow our fault that we're missing it? If I'm honest, I felt the way that Charlie feels. In the movie, he says, "I don't understand it. Instead of feeling happy, I just feel let down." Anyone ever had that experience at Christmas? I am not alone, I do know. You guys, I felt that way this week. I had a surprise, very severe allergic reaction to what I assume is something that I ate that included some wheezing and coughing and intense itching. The wheezing and coughing subsided with medication, but the itching would not let up. I thought my fresh Christmas tree was only exacerbating it, even though I've cut down and lived with the same kind of tree 40 other Christmases. But for some reason this year, I just could not even be in the same room with my Christmas tree longer than 15 minutes without sneezing and feeling like somebody just poured jalapeno juice right in my eyeballs. I took all the meds, but continued to itch all over day and night, all week, and now my beautiful tree is on my back porch. But wait, there's more. My sometimes resistant gray hair decided this week it was fully going to give up on ever being colored again. My winter getaway that I do with AJ every year got planned and canceled 3 times. I worked on this joy-themed Advent sermon all day on my computer, and the next day when I got up to work on it again, it was gone. I cried a tear or two, quarantined in my bedroom furthest away from where that Christmas tree lived, and I thought, I actually do understand it, Charlie. Instead of feeling happy, I too feel let down. Will you pray with me? Gracious God, I can't even imagine all the things that you have in store for us today. But I do pray, Lord, that in this moment we would intentionally stop all of the things that we were doing and all of the things that we were thinking and all of the things that we were involved in before we got here. And we would be present to you. All the things that are coming later, all our lunch and shopping and visiting or whatever it is we're doing after we leave, God, would we just leave that there? Would you help us, God, in your grace and in your mercy and in your power to be present to you during this time? In Jesus' name, amen. In 1973, Dolly Parton wrote these words: and I wish you joy and happiness. But above all this, I wish you love. Even though I told you that Dolly Parton wrote those words, when I say those words, who do you hear singing it? Whitney. Whitney, for sure. So if you're like me, you've sang that song 10,000 times, and I don't know about you, but Dolly nor Whitney's wishes ever did anything for me. If your joy and happiness and pleasure seem to be tracking subpar these days, I just want you to know you're in the right place today. You see, joy and happiness and pleasure are three separate reactions that we experience in our mind, in our body, and in our spirit. When our body feels good, we call that pleasure. For me, that can be produced by a hot shower, really hot shower, a cool breeze on a warm day, delicious dark chocolate, or sipping a cup of freshly roasted and ground Peru with oat milk. Pain is the opposite of pleasure. When our mind feels good, we call that happiness. Happiness is a longer lasting emotion. And though I just mentioned things that bring me physical pleasure, those things may help me feel happy, but happiness in general is very different. Quality time with my family makes me feel happy. Taking care of my plants makes me feel happy, as does sitting near a beach, but none of those things bring me physical pleasure. Some of my happy moments are at the end of a very fun hip-hop fitness class with good music and good friends. My body is sweaty and sore and screaming at me and not at all in a pleasurable state. In contrast to joy, it has a lower intensity and is typically self-focused and linked to being in control. Unlike joy, which is internal, happiness and pleasure typically internal, happiness are more external and circumstantial. Joy, in contrast to either bodily pleasure or mental happiness, is a state that we experience in our spirit. When our spirit is in a good state, we call that joy. An unexpected, short-lasting, high-intensity emotion gifted by God and characterized by a connection with Him, with others, or the world. Just as it is possible to be happy even when our bodies don't feel pleasure, so it is possible to experience joy when our circumstances are not happy. True joy abides in spite of circumstances because it is a gift from God and it is connected to how we live and not necessarily always how we feel. Theologian Anne Robertson notes, in the Bible, the Greek word for happiness was used to describe freedom, money, or health. The Greek word that's used for joy in the Bible, on the other hand, was described by ancient Greeks as the culmination of being, and it can only be found in God. They also say, so interesting, its opposite, the opposite of joy, is not sadness, but fear. After a few tears fell in my bedroom this week, I got curious at why I was feeling so let down, and what I landed on was fear. I realized most of the things that I was dealing with this week were fully dependent on God to fix and manage, and I was afraid, what would happen if things didn't go the way that I'd been hoping or praying? Would I continue to feel let down? Would it be possible to find joy at Christmas time even then? Psalm 97:11. You guys, you know I love the Amplified. We're going to read it in the Amplified. I'm going to put it on the screen. Psalm 97:11 says, "Light is sown like seed for the righteous and illuminates their path, and irrepressible joy is spread for the upright in heart who delight in his favor and protection. Rejoice in the Lord, you righteous ones, those whose moral and spiritual integrity places them in right standing with God, and praise and give thanks at the remembrance of his holy name. Psalm 97 paints this beautiful picture of God sowing and spreading irrepressible joy and light to guide the righteous. Think about that for a moment. What does that even look like? Though God is gracious and the most generous with the gifts that he gives, he is intentional about who he's giving joy and light to. He's not handing it out willy-nilly. If you want some, you have a part to play. And don't miss this vital truth. God is the source. The joy is not ours to manifest or drum up. It doesn't work that way, but we do have to participate. You cannot muster up or force joy in your own strength. And if you have been trying to do that, you are playing God in that scenario. His part is he is the one who has the joy seeds, and he chooses to plant those in righteous people. In case you're wondering, as I was when I was studying this passage of Scripture, what exactly are the requirements of a righteous person? A righteous person is someone who obeys God and, more importantly, is in right relationship with God, his people, and the world. And I say more importantly because righteousness has always been more about relationships than rules.
Come on.
Obeying God is important, but if you are not in right relationship with and connection to God and his people and the world, we don't qualify.
That's right.
So, it's God's part to sow the seeds in the people who obey him and who he is connected to. And our piece, our part, is to just stay connected and pay attention to the light. The good news is this means if you choose to live in obedience and right relationship with God, his people, in the world, he is planting literally and consistently sowing light and joy into you. Can you feel it though? Maybe sometimes? Something tells me that your honest answer is no. I don't think that's abnormal though. Researcher Matthew Johnson found that people find experiences of joy hard to articulate. He says that the very nature of joy pushes the boundaries of our ability to communicate about lived experience via spoken language. He also says, while experiencing joy, we don't lose ourselves, we become more truly ourselves. How interesting. How do you explain that? Let me see if I can oversimplify it for us. As we do what God tells us to do, and we are connected to him, his people, and the world, he is sowing light and joy into us in order that at random times, he can gift us with the sudden, intense experience of recognizing that joy. And each time that happens, we are supernaturally becoming more fully the person he's made us to be. Wow. Researcher Matthew also says, with joy, colors seem brighter, smiling happens involuntarily, and with some, spontaneous weeping is a part of that overwhelming experience of joy. Anyone else? Does that happen to anyone else in here? Okay. I often weep when experiencing joy. This week, Mel called me to tell me some good news about a few things that we had been praying about for a long time, and I just burst out sobbing. Joy. I ate a perfectly cooked filet that my dad made me last Sunday. I took one bite, tears straight in my eyes. Joy. This week, the sun was shining on my face when I was outside. I turned towards it, I closed my eyes, and I breathed deeply for a full minute before I went about what I was doing. Joy. I met with my team, one of my teams that I'm on this week, and right in the middle of someone sharing a story, gratitude tears welled straight up in my eyes and spilled out so that I get to participate in the work that I do. Joy. I'm actually in real life not like a super crier, but I do know that I am not alone in these tear-filled, sudden, unexpected, short bursts of emotion given by God. And I also know that I am certain, you guys, I would rather have more of them than less, which is one thing that keeps me in connection with God, others He's made, and the world in which we live, even when I'm feeling let down by one of those things. Do you ever have times, though, when you lock emotion down? You guys, like it's coming up hot, it's trying to get out, and you are fighting with it every single way you know how just to keep it from spilling out. Externally, you're doing nothing. You're just sitting there staring. But internally, you are shoving whatever is trying to escape back in. You're trying to sit on it, lay on it, zip it up like my super overstuffed India suitcase. You're willing yourself, quit it, just holding on, hoping and praying nothing leaks out. I think sometimes we do this when we're trying to shove down the feelings we don't want, but listen, friends, we do it just as often with feelings we do want. As we grow up, and I'll speak for myself here and let you decide for yourself if this is you, if this has happened to you or not, we can more often than not choose to be a little more serious than we are fun. We grow up and take on responsibility, and somehow, some way, the majority of us lose this sense of playfulness that we so easily lent into when we were younger. Call it exhaustion, call it maturity, whatever you want. But not one young person grows up, wants to grow up if it means that they have to quit playing and having fun. There has to be a middle ground somewhere. Psychologists have found that play is a vital part of the development process for children. Through play, they learn to regulate their emotions and understand the perspective of others. Bernard de Koven said in his book, The Playful Path, so much of what we call fun, happiness, and joy comes to us when we let ourselves connect to something larger, like family or community or the world. Play can be a way for us to open up to experiencing some more joy. For those of you that went to church camp, I did not, but lots of you have been to church camp. Remember how playing games or singing or making s'mores created really good feelings that helped you experience something larger than yourself. A deep sense of connection to God, to others, or the needs of the world. These positive emotions invited by a sense of play help us develop a sense of who we are, what's important to us, and to whom we belong. The joy that stirs in us can signal something to us about our giftedness, our relationships, and our values. Paying attention to when we're experiencing joy helps us direct where we should take our lives, and it also fuels and encourages us to live out our God-given purpose and calling. Tracing joyful moments can be helpful with combating our serious patterns because they often offer insight into what matters most to you and what you value. A few months ago, I attended a week-long conference where I was required to give honest feedback regarding my experience. The feedback was open-ended, and so I asked myself, where was the space during this week where I felt the most life? This gave me a clear view of the week that I had had. And though many parts of the programming were good, I realized that the times that I experienced the most life were not when I was alone or in big groups, but instead when I was in smaller groups, and specifically when I was praying with others. That felt like new information to me. I'm a learner. Growth is one of my absolute values. So I expected my high times to be when I was in session and I was learning new things. But upon reflection, that was not accurate in this particular experience. If you want to practice tracing your joyful moments, it can look like remembering highs and lows from a regular day, paying attention to how you feel after you finish an important work project, considering what was most life-giving and draining when you are remembering past holidays, or examining times when you are doing what matters most to you. But because connection and gratitude are often central to joy, you may find that your moments involve loved ones or even sensory experiences and delight. A few weeks ago, I had a joy moment cooking in my kitchen with my whole family. I don't have like a huge kitchen, you guys. But when I think back on that moment, what I remember was the smell of the pumpkin and the roasted pecans as we were baking together, and how much we laughed at how well we all worked around one another and how many thousands, it seemed like, of bowls we had dirtied. What's important when tracing your joy is to pay attention to the moments when you feel connected, elevated, and purposeful, because those times will help us become more intentional about how we live and who we want to spend our time with. Proverbs 17:22 says, "A joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones." And I do feel like I have to say here, there's nothing wrong with being serious or productive or successful or knowledgeable or being great at what you do. However, if you want to live a fully integrated and connected life with God and others in the world, we cannot spend the majority of our time and energy exercising our serious muscles and neglecting our hope and joyful and playful muscles. We have to exercise them in more even measure. And this means that we must pay attention and invest time into what brings us life so that we can develop and flex the muscles that lead us toward the light and the joy that has been sown in us. As the number one promoter of the feelings wheel, and an avid student on how mental and emotional health intersect with our spiritual health, what I'm not saying is avoid all your other feelings and every moment choose to look for the joy. I actually don't believe anyone can do that. Experiencing a wide range of emotion is part of what makes us human. It's how we learn, and I also believe it's a full grace from God. You cannot selectively will yourself into joy when you want to. It is a surprise gift given by the source, God. But I do believe that we have great power to either nurture, receive, live into, regularly turn towards the light and joy we've been given, or we can simply ignore it and move on too soon. I told my wise friends, Christy and Connie, this week a story about something that I'd prayed for that God did that felt like a miracle. She asked me how I felt about it, and in the moment, tears filled my eyes, joy. And then I said I couldn't even believe that it had happened. I was still just in shock that God had even done it. And she asked me another question, but I don't remember what it was because I felt uncomfortable talking about this great thing that had happened. And all I remember thinking is, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I didn't want her to think that I felt like my specific prayers had caused this great thing to happen. I didn't want it to seem like I was taking any credit. And the truth is, I didn't know how to feel other than grateful. As I tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, she graciously brought it back to my original story with this invitation. Don't move on too soon. Let's relish in the fact that God did this and you were a part of it. She then told me that she has confetti and party blowers in her office. So when people come to her with good news, she gets them out as a practice of bringing the same amount of energy and effort to celebrating and relishing in what God has done as she does with prayer and silence and simple presence when people bring her things that are hard. Wow. What an incredible practice. Yeah. Relishing. Allowing yourself to sit and linger in the fullness of the joy and goodness, celebrating what God has done. Last week on Lectio 365, which is an app many of us use, it's a devotional app, they shared a piece of Zechariah and Elizabeth's story from Luke 1. If you're unfamiliar with the story, allow me to remind you. Now, this is from Luke 1. You can open there if you want to. I'm going to start in Luke 1:6, but I'm not reading the whole thing. I'm just kind of like surfing. So I just want you to know that ahead of time. Luke 1, I'm starting in 6. And it's talking about Zechariah and Elizabeth here. Both of them were righteous. Remember, righteous. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commandments and decrees blamelessly, but they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, the angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. And the angel said to him, "Don't be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth." When his time of service was completed, he returned home, and his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." Though the Bible doesn't tell us why she spends 5 months in seclusion, it is easy to use our holy imagination with why Elizabeth is choosing this time away. Could it be that she was relishing in all that the Lord had already sown in her? Maybe she was relishing in this gift that God had given them. The app narrator said all her married life, Elizabeth's, she had likely endured stares from her community, wondering why a priest's wife was not a happy mother or by now a grandmother. What joy Elizabeth must have felt now that God had intervened, his plans and her prayers working together to bring life. How often, church, do you relish in or even simply appreciate the big and small joys God offers to you in love just because you're connected to him? What are you relishing in? Ecclesiastes 3, verse 12 says, "I perceived that there is nothing better for people than to be joyful and do good as long as they live." My 2023 word of the year from God was playful. Spent the whole year learning to live freely and lightly again. I tried new things, I laughed, I was spontaneous, and I creatively found places where God was inviting me to experience his joy. And you know what? Not once did I shirk any of my responsibilities. Somehow, some supernatural way in the midst of my normal life, God opened my eyes to this old way of living that I had shut out at some point in time for reasons that I think had to do with the way that I felt that I was supposed to live or what I imagined God's expectations of me were. And as I practiced living playfully, I used my values of integrity and growth as boundary markers. If I could stay within those values, it was safe that God was inviting me to pay attention and do the thing. If I could not stay within those boundaries and those values, I chose not to lean into the invitation because Satan was also trying to invite me to be playful. Sorry, I'm going to have to cough. Ooh. Phew. Whew. In my playfulness, I got it right and I got it wrong. That's why I say that I practiced. But along the way, as I kept at it, I simultaneously released some religious baggage that I had put on myself, and God brought life to my bones again. I reimagined what life in connection with Him and others could be like. And friends, I'm still serious. I'm still responsible. I'm just playful too. And honestly, I think everyone that I'm in like regular community with is grateful to God for this transformation. I didn't give up anything I didn't need. I only grabbed hold of what I didn't even realize that I already had been given, and I learned to relish in it. I opened with some of my letdowns this week. But as I close, it seems appropriate to share with you another kind of story from this week. This is my friend Lindsay. She's a pastor in Tennessee. Right before Thanksgiving, we learned that Lindsay had leukemia. And I actually did reach out to her to make sure that I was able to share this and that picture with you, just so you know. We found out that she had leukemia, and I mean, obviously, we're all devastated. I think she has triplets, is that right? Or twins? Twins and another. Okay. Like kids that are maybe 15, 16, 17, 18. And I mean, obviously, we're all devastated. So sad. And we prayed and prayed and prayed. And they had like talked to their church and like had this whole thing where they did like a service where they like told the church what they needed. And you guys, last week she went for her first treatment, I believe, and you guys, fully healed. Yeah. Fully healed. And when she wrote us, she said, every morning for the last few weeks, I've woken up and had to remind myself of the horrible news, but today, I woke up and I got to remind myself of something different, something new, clean blood. That's right. I sobbed in my kitchen. I've cried like 27 times about it, you guys. Maybe you're asking yourself, could God ever replicate this kind of joy for me in my life? God knows the secrets I carry and the unspeakable things that I've done, and not to mention the things I've thought about doing. Is it possible there's enough forgiveness and grace for me? Maybe right now in your life, there's so much up in the air and you have no idea what your future may bring. Though joy sounds nice, it also sounds unbelievable, a little too good to be true, and you just don't know if God sees you in your situation. Even though you could muster up enough faith to believe maybe that He does see you, joy just feels impossible in this season. And if that is you, Receive afresh today the message the angels gave the shepherds so many years ago. Luke 2:10 says, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people." All the people. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He is the Messiah, the Lord. So I think back on the Charlie Brown story, I'm reminded of the moment at the very end of the movie. After a long string of events that left Charlie feeling confused and let down, an unexpected moment of joy arrives as he is connected with his friends, gathered around a miracle tree, freshly reminded of what Christmas is all about. The great joy of Christmas, that Christ has come to be with us. If you feel far from God today, church, He's near. If you feel let down, He is near. If you feel unworthy, He is near. If you feel hope or peace or joy or love, He too is near. As we prepare for communion together, I ask that you consider the personal invitation to you from God today. Maybe it's to obey the last thing that He asked you to do. Maybe it's to intentionally spend more time tracing your joyful moments. Maybe it's to simply relish in something that you've already been given. Maybe it's something else. As you consider your response to God's invitation this morning, please come and receive freely the symbols of God's immeasurable and abundant love for you. And then I will light the pink candle of joy. So you may stand. There are two tables here in the front. There is one table in the back for communion. You are going to take a cracker from the tray, dip it in the juice, and then eat it. Don't give everyone else the joy of your germs. If you are gluten-free or immunocompromised, there's also cups for you. But before you take communion, please consider the invitation God is asking you. What is He inviting you to this morning? And then decide how you're going to respond and then take communion. Okay?